Hi, my name is Lola Rheaume. I'm a software developer with Dell Technologies, and I'm also a 3D animator and illustrator. And I'm on Breaking the Biz podcast.
Stay tuned for today's episode of Breaking the Biz, an informative podcast where we dive into the world of entertainment by interviewing seasoned professionals who have made their mark in the industry. Gain invaluable insights as they share their personal journeys, offering advice on navigating the dynamic landscape of the entertainment industry. Whether you're an aspiring actor, musician, filmmaker, author, animator, or any creative soul, tune in for expert career guidance, insider tips, and first-hand accounts on breaking into the entertainment industry. Get ready to unlock the secrets behind successful careers and fuel your own passion for the limelight. Please remember to like this video and to subscribe to our channels for more great conversations.
Greetings from Breaking the Biz, brought to you by Yes I Can Unity Through Music and Education. I'm William Felber, your navigator through the intriguing universe of the entertainment industry, as revealed by the visionaries and creators who bring it to life. Stay tuned as we delve into diverse insights from the forefront of entertainment, hearing from pioneers, creators, and agents of change. Prepare for a journey filled with tales of innovation, resilience, and the undying quest for artistic brilliance.
Welcome to Breaking the Biz podcast with the Yes I Can crew. We have got a great guest with us. We have Leanne, also goes as Lola Rheaume. She's an app developer, a computer tech, a 3D animator, modeler. She does it all. She enrolled in Austin Community College Software Engineering program in 2022. She worked towards a career as solution architect in pushing visibility for queer, femme folks and those with unconventional backgrounds succeeding in tech. Identifies as ADHD, PTSD, and strives to lead by example and loves making new friends along the journey. She's rounding out project management and front end skills to develop tools for support teams and reduce bottleneck in business operations. This continues as she stacks further on her education. She enjoys writing spooky children books about death and processing grief. And as she gets more experience, she's building an app to connect those in need locally, grassroots nonprofits, and resources to help those in the darkest hour find help more easily. Outside of the office, Lola enjoys art, gardening, guilty social media as well, and is here to network. So I want to thank you and welcome you to Breaking the Biz.
Thanks for having me, sir. And I know that was a mouthful. As you can tell, I have a lot of hyperfixations and probably going to talk about a few of them today. So
It's all good. I love people who do, put their hands in a lot of different things. And I love the idea of the children's books and writing and helping with grief and loss. It's something that young individuals really don't understand. And I love all of the app development and everything that you're doing. So I want to start with, when you were young, what was the dream job? When I grow up, I'm going to be.
So the very first one I remember in elementary school was school teacher. And that was honestly because I didn't know that there was much else besides that. But as I got older, I really enjoyed the arts. I always wanted to paint and draw and all these, do all these visual things. And right about high school is when I started to realize that you can do things for game development and film. Like it wasn't just some, fancy thing on a screen. You could actually work with teams and build these things. And I started trying to focus on an art portfolio after that.
I love it. So right in high school, you knew you needed a portfolio. You get exposed to other different mediums and jobs. You obviously love art and love video games and creating and molding and doing all of that. So once you graduate high school, what's your route? What do you do after you graduate high school?
Well, I worked on the portfolio throughout the summer and I took a couple of summer jobs to help save up for school. There was no school back then for what I wanted in the state of Texas, which is where I lived at the time. Um, I had chosen a school in Colorado. I'm sorry, I had to think for a minute. I'd chosen a school in Colorado, and I was just getting everything together to move to Colorado. Some of that was, getting paperwork together to make sure I had, a space at the dorm. I had all of my registration, my admissions paperwork, financial aid, all of like the little bitty components that go into starting a college education. I didn't know too much about student loans or financial aid, so I do highly recommend that people really dig into that. But this was in 2009. I am very old. This was in 2009, and there wasn't as much awareness about the cost of an education, especially a private education. So research was 100% something that I did and probably should have done more of. And then we packed the car, and then I got dumped off.
Love it. So you get dumped off at college. What exactly is your major and what are you studying when you get to Colorado?
So the first hit was I wanted to be an illustrator. I liked storytelling. I knew I wanted to work in games or animation, but I didn't quite know how that worked. So I was coached through the admissions process to just do your foundation, take in some of the illustration courses because that was going to be a stronger design focus versus some of the other possible pathways right out of the gate. And I just started taking drawing one, life drawing one. I started dabbling into animation, 2D animation, just to kind of make that transition. And then over the next couple of terms, realized, okay, I really do want to go into animation. It's not just, I don't want to just make comic books, although those are a beautiful medium. I want to be a part of like a motion-based storytelling experience. And it just kind of grew over time the more I learned about it. I had no blueprint. This is all on my own. So I kind of learned on the fly there.
I kind of love it. Sometimes, even with the blueprint, we go array in different roads, right? And I love that you just kind of you knew art, you knew animation, you took all of the steps, art one, art two, and so forth, and appreciating comics and appreciating, art on the page, but the fact that you wanted to make motion and movement. How long did you stay in college working on that?
It took me about 6 years to finish my 3D animation and film degree. Um, and I say that because there were financial aid challenges. I didn't come from a family with money, so I had to cut to part-time for a couple of years in between in there while I worked as well. So a 4-year degree took me about 6 as a result of a couple of those factors. But the first 2 years were foundational. Then we went to 2D and then we went to 3D. And then they had just started splashing in game art. This is around 2012, 2013. It's when it really started to pick up, prevalence in, art school. And I started taking more of those classes as I was nearing the completion of my degree. Still primarily a filmmaker, but I had enough that I could talk to a video game team. I could be a part of a video game team, albeit on the fringes at the very end there.
Okay, so I love it. You have two ways you can go. You can make movies and share your stories that way, or you could do it also in animation or video game design. Out of curiosity, do you remember what like the biggest game was in 2012 when you were graduating that you were like, I agree with you. Video games just keep expanding and getting bigger and more popular. I'm just curious.
Everybody would not shut up about Skyrim. We had the art book. We had it was BioShock Infinite. It was Halo 3, Halo 4, and in fact, that was the first video game project I worked on. I worked for a fan project for the Halo franchise. It was called Installation 01. That's kind of how I kind of cut my teeth on that pathway for a little bit there. But yeah, it was really like first-person shooters, huge, rich storytelling worlds. Ken Levine was the it thing, along with Bethesda at the time.
I love it. So talk me through, was that an internship working on the Halo project?
My partner at the time was really big into the Halo scene, and modding. The modding community was kind of where you would cut your teeth in lieu of an internship or something back then. I think it still kind of is, but I haven't been a part of that for a little bit. But he introduced me to the Installation 01 team as a 3D modeler. as a character, 3D modeler. And they did an interview with me. They liked what I did, and I was brought onto the project. I don't know if my work made it in there because I only stayed for a couple of years. So who knows? They might have had to scrap it and redo it, but it was fun.
Okay, I love it. And, sometimes you just say yes to experiences because you're going to learn, and it's something, again, you can put in your portfolio. As you
Yeah.
were talking about in high school and you were working on your portfolio over the summer, did you need that portfolio to then get into Colorado?
So I did, yes, but each school will often have its own requirements. My school actually removed requirements a few years after I enrolled for a portfolio to try to make it more accessible to students. I think it's still the case that each university is a little bit different. But yeah, I had to have mine screened. It was like AP art or everything like that. It was not super heavy on the motion or the animation just yet, but I could draw a unicorn really well, I was good with still lives, little
Love
things
it.
like
I love it. Okay. Enough though that you knew you needed a portfolio, which is quite
that.
impressive. So talk me through once you take 6 years, you're working at the same time, totally understandable. I don't know anyone that just knocks out college in the 4 years. What comes next? Do you get an internship through school? Where do you find work, and how do you find work?
So when I graduated, I believe it was 2014 and 2015. And that was the point where there was a shift in the industry, right? I'm sure a lot of us are familiar with it. If you saw 2015, then you saw where the video games industry was at the time. There was a shift for the what was it, the visual artists, like the visual effects artist strike was happening at that point. There were studios being bought up and cut down. The time that I graduated, and I will speak with transparency, my portfolio was not the strongest, which is why I was happy to work with IO1 and to continue getting that practice. But the 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 industry and the landscape that I graduated in I was not there. I was not competitive. We'll put it that way. So I do encourage folks that if they find themselves in that place that they don't really feel like they can compete, they're applying for jobs and everything. Like don't stop trying, for example, but keep a tab on the industry so you see where you're going to fall out. I didn't know to keep a tab. So by the time I graduated, um, my my skill set wasn't what the industry needed. I didn't have marmoset experience. I didn't have 3D coat, and I do apologize, my voice is a little um, there were certain tools that were just breaking into the scene that I had no clue what to do with. And so that put me kind of at a disadvantage. So keeping on top of those tools is really important. The tech stack always changes, and you must be able to change with it. For work, I ended up moving to Austin, Texas. I left Colorado. I had a really nasty breakup, and I was just like, I'm going to go to Austin. I'm going to start fresh. And I took a job as a payments processor. You have to pay your bills, you have your student loans. But I kept painting and I kept drawing and I kept working on these other things. And eventually, because I was still plugged into tech, I ended up doing a curve into tech. And I took a role with an app. I was part of like their customer support team, just as their entry level, just get the job done. But I got to engage with some really interesting people. I got to see what product design was like. I got to see where motion graphics and animation can help even in a commercial space, not just, your traditional Disney or your Bethesda. Motion graphics play a huge role in workforce training and all these kinds of things, advertisements, what have you. There's plenty of work, even if it's not your first path, right? And just over time, I kept in tech, and the longer I stayed in tech, my art skill, my art drive, kind of separated for a little while until about 2 or 3 years ago when I snapped it back together during COVID. Um, if that
Now,
makes sense.
yeah. No, I got to highlight some of the stuff you're talking about because it's wonderful. Um, you don't always come out of college and go like, all right, I'm ready for PlayStation. I'm ready for Xbox. I'm ready for, Blizzard. Sometimes you have to take the skills that you learned and just get your foot in the door. The other part is when you're paying for your own education, you got to figure out how to pay that stuff back. And so taking a job where you can still tap into your skill set and get paid for it, kudos to you. The other part I want to give you kudos is you continued to create and paint and work on your craft on your own time. I also want to go before that, the self-awareness that you have. Sometimes people always talk about imposter syndrome and they're not ready. Imposter syndrome are like that fake it till you make it. And I love how you had your self-awareness to go, I'm just not ready at what they need. Sometimes you find an internship and they're willing to teach you and tap into the skills that you're already kind of bringing to the table. But if you're going right into a studio and they're expecting you to know these programs and you haven't been trained or learned these programs, it really, you don't want to go there and get fired. You have that self-awareness to know I wasn't ready. So I think that's very important to know, the just self-awareness. Amen. It's a very needed skill to be successful. So I love also how you said, with the animation and the tech, seeing how that's used for product design and product creation, which are skills that you can use forever. And I'm sure as you continue on your trajectory, talking about your career, you are able to tap into that. But everything doesn't have to be Disney and everything doesn't have to be a video game. So continue on. COVID, go for it.
Oh, I can also say, like, minor segue. I didn't know that an internship was possible when I graduated either. So, like, I don't know if that was just me, like, yeah, or if it was just they weren't as prevalent. I don't think 2015 me would be able to tell either way, but there are tons of internships and junior developer positions and all the stuff that happens in this day and age. Like, there are so many. I see them on LinkedIn all the time because my husband helps run like a little job board for them. So like 100%, like just because my story kind of deviates, it is a lot better, for seekers now than it was, I think, in my case as well. So I want to make sure that in the universe, there's a lot more.
Yeah. And, and you brought up something that I didn't even think about. Like some people graduated in 2008 and we had the huge market crash and everyone lost jobs. And, I can remember myself graduating and wanting to go into music, and Napster came out and completely, changed the way music was delivered and taken and downloaded. And obviously now it's very similar, but it changed the landscape. So when you're saying graduating and wanting to go into video games and then there's a shift, it is very hard. And just the fact that you were able to fall and find where you needed to go to survive is very important. I just want to highlight that. So after COVID, what comes next?
With COVID, we were all put in our rooms. I was still working for the customer support position, but the burnout was real, and the particular support that I handled, it was not just your standard insurance claims or something like that. Sometimes some awful things could happen. It was not quite, what do you call it? It wasn't quite like a 911 dispatcher, but it wasn't as easy as if you pay your bill, we'll turn your card back on, something like that. It wasn't quite like we work for Spectrum. So I ended up losing my sister in 2020. And this is a little bit of a dark tone, so there's a content warning here, but her husband shot her in 2020, and we found out Father's Day. And that's where like the grief and the books come from. I had to find a way to process, and that's where I decided to spin it back into it. That was very hard for my family, and my little sister had a 2-year-old toddler, like a little son, and he couldn't understand what was going on. Grandma and grandpa were screaming and crying, like there was a lot going on, and we started coming up with this idea slowly over time. I still kept the job, but I ended up having a nervous breakdown just from the stress of just like being locked in, the grief. There's just something in there. I went, eh. So I ended up taking a sabbatical. And this is something that if you work a certain amount of hours in a role, it doesn't matter what the role is. It's called the Family Medical Leave Act. you have a protected amount of time where you can kind of like get your business back together. It looks different depending, I think, what's going on, I can't really speak about it. I'm not an insurance claimant or HR, but for me, it was you can take 3 months, you had benefits rolled into your job, you worked with us for a number of years, you can go get your head screwed back on right, and come back in 3 months for us. And I did, and I continued kind of working on my own thing, but I started to really feel the pressures. I wanted to make something, I wanted it to mean something. And that next year, my best friend died. So it was a hit after a hit. And that was the clincher. That one we did not come back from easy. Um, they were a wonderful artist. They're the reason I want to create the app. They're the reason that I wanted to really go into the intersectionality of art and design, because they were a fantastic artist themselves that just couldn't come back from the reality of their life. Like they lost their job during COVID. They were severely mentally ill. They had just found out that they were autistic. They were struggling with their identity. Like they were like didn't know if they were trans. I loved them so much, and I wish that there had been more help for them at the end of the day. And that's no one's fault. Like that was the choice. But, and again, this is dark, so we'll get back to the good stuff in a minute. But this was like the crucible, the lynching turn of it. And I did not go back to my job as an agent. I couldn't. It just didn't. It was hollow. The team didn't want to really work with me, and it was a whole thing. So I took another sabbatical, and I went to Sweden with my husband, and I got to spend some time out there. And his mother is an artist, and she kind of gave me this talking to, and she's like, "You need to create something. I don't know what it is, but you need to actually get back into what your passions are. This job was paying the bills, but what are your passions? What do you want out of this life?" And I was like, "You know what, Thyra? I have no idea." So I went and I got this sick tattoo for my friend. I don't know if you can see it. It's a mace. Their name was Mace. And I came back, and of course you have to have a job. But I really started focusing on going back to school, trying to build up skills and tools so that I can make this app, finish this book. And I continued to paint, and I continued to do all these other things because I was very tired of no longer being creative. And I know this is long-winded, but that's how we got back into it. And the spark came back. It took loss, but it finally came back, and I started creating again.
I am sorry for all your loss. That's absolutely some real heavy stuff. I lost my mom, and I have a 5-year-old, and she didn't really grasp or understand. And I understand needing something to put your focus into, and finding something bright and that light. Because sometimes when you're a creative person and you're going through that, it's hard to find that creative spark. And it's hard to get out of, that hole. So kudos to you for doing what you did. I love how just that talking to was enough to be that catalyst to kind of go, okay, you're right. I need to create something, but I don't know exactly what it is, but I need to tap back into my artistic creative self. And I imagine that creating that app obviously is inspired by the loss and the best friend and so forth within the family. Do you go right into creating that app or the book at this time?
I knew I needed to go back to school. I wasn't a programmer. And in fact, I didn't even know that. I know this is going to sound really, really dumb. I didn't know that like femme folks or women could be engineers. I hadn't seen any of them. That was not talked about at the time when I went to school the first time around. To me, it was like Hacker Man, levels of weird stuff. It was the Terminator. It was all those old sci-fi movies from the 80s. And I know that sounds ridiculous in the modern era, but I didn't come from an educated family either, to be fair. It was one of those things like, went over my head. I enrolled in school in ACC to be able to make the app. That is still a thing that's happening. We have a group that we founded called Pflugerville Gays. We're still trying to figure out our nonprofit status because we're all still learning with that, but we hold fundraisers for canned food drives, the Vets for Equality. Pflugerville's the hometown that I'm in now, and I serve that community to the best of my can. Um, and we collect resources. We have this little book. It's a bit manual still, like the work still gets done. But over time, we're building out these tools, and we hope to launch it in the next couple of years once I get a little bit farther in my development skill. What I do for Dell now is not quite the same as a mobile app. Totally different languages, totally different frameworks, and so I know that I need to get a little bit stronger in that field before I can like put this out on the app store. It doesn't stop us from doing it like from a website, but I really kind of poured into the book. It's still in progress, mostly because I wanted to talk about my friend and to talk about my sister, and a lot of people don't know how to handle death. And I know that we don't want the podcast to be about death, but a lot of people don't know how to react. They will look at you like, "Oh God, what's going on with you?" Or my manager did one of these when because I was on the call with him when I found out about my sister. He just went, and it was like this, like you could see, okay, like that was not a great look. So me working on this book with my little sister, one, it will, help her children down the road, but I'm hoping it will help more people, more children. And I think that we aren't the only ones doing those sorts of projects. There's a lot of sadness and people are working through it the ways people work through it.
Okay. Do you go, and you mentioned different coding, obviously, for an app and different coding for what you do with Dell. Can you dive into what you do with Dell?
Yes and no.
Whatever you can disclose, go for it. But yeah,
just so your listeners know, like there's a limit to what I can say. So I do
sure.
apologize for being broad. We work with a combination of front end programming languages, so HTML, CSS, JavaScript. There's things like Node.js. I particularly don't work with Node, but those big three, I do. Specifically, JavaScript I spend most of my head, banging my head on that one for 8 hours a day. We also, you see things like .NET, you see Python, you see just about anything you can imagine, there's a team that's using it. A lot of PowerPoint, and a lot of what was it? Kind of how to navigate Teams, Zoom, like motion graphics. That's where the arts degree kind of came back into play, because I could make one heck of a presentation, and people liked that. So I ended up making templates, and the templates were a hit. So I ended up doing documentation, which ended up how I got my internship with Dell in the first place, is because I was doing all of this documentation and these A/B studies and these design studies, and it kind of snowballed from there. So I can say that one thing can lead to another, and just one language or no languages will still get you somewhere.
I love it.
At least as far as Dell is concerned, it's the talent and the drive to learn that they want.
Okay, yeah, and that's funny that you mentioned it, because sometimes you get these people come out of college and they just kind of not conceited, but they just feel like the world they're entitled. They just think, throw me the job. And if you can find someone who is willing to learn and a good person, I much rather have that person on my team than the person who's coming straight out with like, oh, check out my degree and what I can do. So that makes absolute sense to me. I want to ask you, with all of the coding and going to school, who's like your mentor? Do you have a mentor that you can reach out to and just get feedback on your ideas, if that's what you're working on with Dell, if that's what you're working on with your app, or what you're doing with the children's book with loss and grief? When I say mentor, what comes to mind?
I actually have a few. I was very lucky to have more than one, even just to have one. It's not easy to find a mentor. One of them came from the internship. And I'm friends with her to this day. She just actually found out that she was a late diagnosed ADHD and autistic woman. So she's just been in the stratosphere most of her working career, and I've been trying to help her kind of walk through what I learned when I was diagnosed. She's fantastic and has a little one of her own that, work on books and stuff. The other one is actually the neurodiversity hiring director. Her name is Danielle Biddick. She works for Dell. If you look up the neurodiversity in the workplace program, she's one of the pilot folks with it. And I've spoken on a couple of their webinars with them as well, talking about my experiences as somebody who came from that ADHD, autistic, neurodivergent background. Not specifically the creative aspect of it, but she was the first one that made me not feel crazy. And sometimes I will talk to her about the things I'm working on. She's like, no, you're good. Keep doing that. I love this. Like there's little soundproof rooms for for phone calls in the HQ. And sometimes we'll just get a coffee and we'll go into these little soundproof rooms and like throw our phones and just scream. And it's great. Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't think that's what they were meant for, but we'll catch up very quickly like that. And she's like, you're not crazy. You keep doing what you're doing. It's really good. And I think that there was one more, but I don't know if they want me to just like announce it on a podcast, but they are
That's
also
totally fine.
helpful and deeply creative in their own right. So
I love, the fact that more people are being more inclusive and understanding diversity, understanding autism, understanding ADHD, quiet rooms, whatever you need to, your accommodation. Everyone should be allowed an accommodation that they need to be successful. Obviously, a room like that's not costing anything. There's other businesses that have places where you can take a nap if you need to take a nap, it's nice to have a company that really gets it, and having a hiring, with neurodivergent hiring committee is very important, because obviously interviewing individuals on the autism spectrum have a hard time with, typically eye contact, and maybe don't do as well on an interview as someone else, but bring so much gifts and talents to the job. So I love that Dell is doing that. Networking. How important has networking been to your success?
But I will tell you right now, I am awful at it. In fact, the only reason I can talk as candidly as I am is because you are on my second screen. I am not looking at you directly. Um, I I wasn't very good at it in early on in my career, which is kind of how, that slow career growth was just the nature of my path. The more that I learned about it, so like the more people were talking about it, the more trainings that I sought out, because I knew that I needed to upskill. There was something wrong with me. I had to fix it. You know what I mean? Um, there's nothing wrong with me, but these are just skills that didn't come naturally. So I ended up seeking them out. I would read books on body language in the school library, in REMCAD, in art school. And I continued to kind of do that fervent research on how to be a person, all the way through. Um, Networking is hard, but it is necessary in this day and age. Most of the 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 internship or the graduate student or whatever work that Dell will do will tell you, like, the networking is half the battle. Get your story in front of as many people as possible, because even if they don't have a place for you, they might know somebody that will down the line. So you must know how to speak your truth, tell your story, and you don't necessarily have to have charisma. Like I've told my story often enough that it comes naturally. It's not natural for many people, and it wasn't natural for me in the beginning. But I will say it's important. It really is. So find a buddy to practice, work on your storytelling. Like, what makes you you? Why do you want the things you want? Where do you want to go? You don't have to know your 5, 10, your 5 year, your 10 year, your 20 year plan. You don't have to pick out, the suit you're going to wear at your wedding, but you do need to know kind of where you want your trajectory to go. And if people can, they'll help you. People are really collaborative, wonderful little mammals, which is
Yeah.
a really way to put it, but
No, I think you bring up some really good points, and it's something that I tell the individuals in Yes I Can all the time, is you can't look at anyone and go, you want to be a programmer, you want to be a 3D animator, unless you are vocal and you self-advocate for what you want. Networking is difficult for everyone. But when you are surrounded with individuals that have similar skill sets, similar passions, it comes out a little more easily.
Yes.
I would say. So I love that you have that community. And I think that people are looking for individuals, uh, on the spectrum and who have ADHD, who are thinking outside of the box and thinking differently. Obviously, if we had everyone do everything the same way, we're not going to have any innovation and we're not going to advance. So you have to have products, you have to create things that fit with everybody. So that's a beautiful thing as well. Is there a mantra that you find yourself saying that keeps you focused or in a positive light?
You mean during my day-to-day work or just in
Sure.
general?
Yeah. Day-to-day work or just, helping you through life. I always tend to say, people go like, how's your day going? And another day in paradise is what I always say. Like, no
Living
matter
the
what,
dream.
yeah, living the dream.
Yeah.
Is there something for you that you catch yourself saying?
So we grew up, my mom's favorite thing to say, and she's deaf, so that's one of the reasons why animation was big. That was a segue I forgot to put in there way back in. Um, do the best you can with what you have, and no matter what, it will be enough. As long as you tried, to your best at the end of the day. She also liked que sera, sera, whatever will be, will be. So like your logo, which is one of the reasons I really liked your organization, Yes, I Can, was just like, I had a lot of people tell me no in my life, or you can't do this because of X, Y, and Z. You don't know what you're talking about. You're a girl, yeah, 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 And my mantra is like, I'll show you. Like
No, amen. Like those are
whatever it
all,
takes.
yeah. It's true, and we talk about growth mindset, and it's very easy to say I can't do that, but it needs to be changed with I can't do that yet. Like the more experience I get, I'll knock it out. Or if you haven't done it, you just haven't done it yet. So, having that strong growth mindset is very important. If you were speaking to a young individual who wants to go into the field of programming, 3D art, modeling, animation, what career advice would you give to them? What education would you advise for them to pursue?
You don't necessarily have to be a great draftsman. Like being able to draw with a pencil in this day and age isn't really, necessary, but you do really need to know why a body will move the way it was. Like you know your foundations as far as like the 12 principles of animation if you want to be an animator. Drawing isn't necessary in this day and age with the tools that we have available with mocap and everything. But even if you have the top of the line equipment, the best mocap studio in the world, your character will still look like it floats if you don't understand how weight works, for example. If you wanted to code an app, know what the requirements are for the respective app stores. Google is a little different than Apple. Some of them have proprietary languages, which is the reason I'm a little tripped up on my app. But my website's okay because I can do the front end work on my own. If you know that you're going to handle things like sensitive data as a programmer, you should probably understand databases and how to keep data secure, particularly if it's for people that could be at risk. Let's say you have somebody that needs help for domestic violence. I think Mrs. Gates, or Bill Gates's Melinda Gates, I believe her name is. She came up with this whole tool so you can hit a button and you would be safe, or you were like ordering a pizza for that purpose. But she had to have all this research done to make sure that she was going to take care of these people that relied on her tool. A catastrophic tool failure, like we just saw with CrowdStrike, can really cause damage. So you need to know what you're working with. And I tell people to never stop learning, never stop researching, and never stop asking questions, because the more you know, the better your choices will be, and the better outcome you'll have, because you'll make these choices from an informed place. I know that's a lot of words and it's kind of boring, but the other thing is take breaks. Burnout is real. If I had just stopped and realized that I was struggling with the grief that I had gone through at the beginning of the pandemic, I probably could have avoided at least one nervous breakdown. That might have changed my trajectory for good or for bad, but it's so important to take care of the mind and the body. You know, don't break your hands until you can't use them anymore. They're your tools as artists, as musicians, as craftsmen. Carpal tunnel helps nobody. I'm trying really hard not to do too much with my hands, you know, but like all I want to do is just like T-Rex right now, like as an illustration. Um, you know, your voice is a tool for a musician. Your hands are a tool for an artist, and your mind is a tool for a programmer. All of these things are holistic and should be taken care of.
I think that's a fantastic advice, right? Like you got to know when to take breaks. You got to know when burnout is coming because we all have that. Grief, grieving, we all grieve in different ways as well, and it hits at different times. I don't need to preach that to you. I know you know that. But yeah, like that's great advice for animation, great advice for, artists, musicians, voiceover act. I mean, all of it of what you said. Uh, the other thing that I love about you is that you're constantly learning. And um, is there programs that are you diving into a program right now that you love that you feel is like the next thing that you need to know? Just curious.
I am, I want to say big toe levels deep into Python, and that's mostly because I don't use it in my day to day. It's it's more like it can be used like a duct tape language. It's not necessarily something you would write entirely in its own. It's mostly for automation. But my goal is once I have a little bit of a grasp on Python, I can use this to create tools that will help me pull my larger pieces of my day-to-day work, either for Dell or on my personal projects with greater efficiency. Like sometimes just manually moving things just drive you buggy. And you don't really want to do manual, right? The whole thing is to automate. But I'm still learning a lot of this on my own, even though Dell is wonderful and a great place to learn. It's not a part of my day to day. So this is my outside little pet project. I will also say, if you want to make games and you want to bypass like the 3D thing entirely, I've seen whole beautiful games made just in JavaScript. Like that was one of the things that, you can do Mario clones. I think somebody did Legend of Zelda clone as well, where it was, I think at the classic, they used like maybe Game Maker and sprites and JavaScript. I'm not entirely sure, but browser-based games are wonderful. You can drop that thing on itch.io. You can try out other people's indie games through itch. It's a great way to kind of learn and practice tools. Game jams too. If you want to do animation for game jams, like that, I did that. We made this really ugly thing run on a marble ball through the universe, kind of Katamari style, except it was eating the planets. It wasn't just trying to make planets, you know what I mean? It was stupid and simple, but it was fun, you know?
There are so many games like that, though. I mean, I think about like a Candy Crush, a free downloadable game that just, or, it got people hooked, and then you charge a little something, even $1, $2 for everyone who's downloading a Candy Crush. I imagine that individual is making some pretty good bread,
Yes.
from creating that. So with your app, is that something that you want to offer for free? Is that like, I know that's down the line. Is your idea a free download? How do you market it? Have you been thinking of, I imagine you've been thinking about all these things.
It's me and my business partner right now. Yes, we do want to have it for free. The whole point is it is a resource for folks that need help, you know? There are a couple of websites here or there that can do it. I think there's findhelp.org is one, but that thing can be hard to navigate. There's a lot of phone calls involved. Our goal is to try to make it a little bit easier using something like a GPS, like pretty much Google Maps API with a database and all this kind of good stuff. I lost my train of thought. If you wish to remind me of the
No,
questions.
just how you plan. You did answer one A.
You didn't want to monetize it if we can
No,
avoid
yeah,
it.
you want it to be free. You
Yes.
want to make it a little bit easier
Yes.
for individuals to navigate. I want to ask you, what's your take on AI in your industry?
It is a lot. It is everywhere. It's not something to be afraid of. My husband uses it for work. He didn't a year ago. Do you know what I mean? It it will change the way that certain things are done, but it is not as the end is near, all beautiful art jobs are over. Those things don't just disappear, they just will change. There are a couple of reports that have been done about like the statuses of jobs and AI and all that good stuff. And if you remind me, I can give a list of resources or links, to accompany your when your podcast drops. But they say like AI prompt engineer is going to be a new thing that you can invest in total career, invest your entire career in. Thank you. I'm getting ahead of myself. Um, AI artist. I saw that on LinkedIn a couple of days ago, helping my husband with the job search thing that he moderates. Uh, there are still traditional ones. I've also seen TV anime artists, going through looking for jobs for this board that he does. AI is something that you should be aware of. It is something that while there's tons of free learning material about it, you should learn about it because it's going to be here to stay, but it's not going to be world ending necessarily.
No, and as you talk about it, I think like it takes a very bright, intelligent mind like you to program the AI to do what the AI needs to do. Everything that I have found with studying AI is all about how detailed your prompt is and instructions coming from the human to then create the AI. But as you're saying, like your husband a year ago didn't use it and now is using it, it can be um, a support to a tool to what you're doing. So I think you explain that definitely well. I have one last question, and I know that we're going to get questions from our group here. And I know you're probably one of those people who needed to go through certain things and that led you to where you are. But if there was one piece of advice you would give to your younger self, what would you tell a younger Leanne? Like, change this, go explore that, maybe get your degree in this. Anything you would change?
I would probably tell younger Leanne to pick a lane. I loved everything that has to do with the creative process, and I still do. I love painting, I love drawing, I love sculpting. I was just like, you know what, I should pick up metallurgy. That's something I should do because then I could make my own little doodads for the Ren Fair. Pick a lane, you know, focus on a skill, see it to it, get the max dopamine hit out of it. Um, had I stuck with animation from the start, or stuck with game design from the start, or stayed as an illustrator from the start, I, I may not have been a jack of all trades, but I probably would have had a more solid edge in the fields that I had originally been passionate about. I don't regret my path. In fact, I love my job and what I do. But if you are absolutely 100% committed to being in a creative field, you can't give up, but pick something that brings you the most joy and hone that skill like nobody's business. The master of all is better than the master of one, but something master of none. I'm not great with allegories or whatever, Jimi Hendrix, but pick something you love and do it till it makes you sick, I guess, and then keep doing it a little bit longer, and eventually you'll succeed. That's just the nature of things. You can only fail so much.
Beautiful, beautiful advice. Absolutely beautiful. I just want to thank you again for your time. It's been absolutely delightful. I love listening to your career roadmap. From darkness comes light, and you're definitely in the light right now. And you found exactly where you need to be. You're ambitious. You've got things around the corner. I love, like I mentioned earlier, your skill set of self-awareness, resiliency, but most importantly, also the empathy that you have. Sometimes when you experience things, you are able to really be in that moment. And it's hard for other individuals who have not experienced that to sometimes put themselves in someone else's shoe. And you just know that inevitably there are going to be people that are going to be in your shoes and experience loss and grief. And I think you're tackling that in not only the app, but the books that you're working on as well. I just want to wish you continued success in all that you do. I love that you are a creative person and you find your outlet to express that creativity in many different fields. I know you mentioned just sticking to one lane, but I truly feel you belong in so many different lanes. So just continue being ambitious and working on all those projects. And we all look forward to following your success in your career. So I just want to thank you one more time for donating your time and sharing your story and inspiring others.
Thank you, Brett. It's my pleasure.
As we conclude another enriching episode, we hope you've found inspiration in the stories shared today. Let's take a moment to honor Yes I Can's role in bringing Breaking the Biz to life. Yes I Can's commitment to empowering young people with disabilities through education, advocacy, and mentorship shines brightly, paving paths of opportunity and dialogue. This podcast celebrates the organization's dedication to nurturing talent and facilitating impactful discussions. Breaking the Biz is more than a podcast. It's a part of Yes I Can's broader mission to amplify voices, dismantle barriers, and craft a world that's more inclusive and accessible for everyone. Each episode is a chapter in our shared narrative of progress, education, and empowerment, driven by the spirit of Yes I Can. Thank you for spending your time with us on Breaking the Biz. Continue to challenge the status quo and share stories that resonate. Until our paths cross again, let's keep transforming aspirations into achievements and infuse every endeavor with optimism. Here's to advancing the landscape of the entertainment industry, one episode at a time. I'm your host, William Felber. See you next time.